paralyzed by fear. I'm clutching you so tight, afraid to lose. I retreat more each night. Where is my voice? I've muted myself, and in my shyness, it's you I repel. I will find my way to express my voice. I must find my way to ignite my spark. Find my way to me so we can be we. Find my way. The fractures between us rise into view. I cling to the scraps of the care that falls through. Where is my strength? I've crumbled apart, hiding from the truth. I've shattered my heart, but I will find my way to regain my strength. I must find my way to restore my will. Find a way to me so we can be we. Find my way. Here is this moment to take a chance, to go on alone or grow and advance. I will find my way to express my voice. I must find my way to ignite my spark. Find my way to me so we can be we. Find my way. I will find my way to regain my strength. I must find my way to restore my will. Find my way to me so we can be we. Find my way. Find my way. I'll find my way. Happy Sunday, everybody. Thank you for finding your way to Sunday Live with me, Caleb, coming to you from Seattle, Washington. Hope you're doing well out there, staying safe, and enjoying the de-thawing of the country. I actually got out to see a band live yesterday, which was incredible. It was very, very strange to be in the presence of other human beings who, in a social context, and all these folks, all but one of them, I'd never met in person. I'd all met through Zoom, and suddenly they were in the real world. And the first thing the first person said to me, looked to me and said, "You're not AI." Which I thought was absolutely perfect. And it was also surreal because it was a performance in an airplane museum that was like covered but outdoors on the side, open on the sides, and the stage was built into down the ramps from a 747. So very, very, for a first-time experience of getting out post-COVID vaccination, it was just added more levels to surrealness of the whole event. Let's see what's going on down in California with Joe. Hey, Joe, you out there?
Yes. Good afternoon.
So we had a nice sunny day yesterday, and I was just saying to the audience that I got out to an actual performance. It's a band I've been consulting with here in Washington this last year. So every week I've met members of this group and the support team, and every 2 weeks I host a all hands team meeting. And only the lead singer had I ever met, and that was twice before COVID happened.
Ah,
So first time in 14 months going out and being social. First time in 14 months hearing live music, and first time meeting all these people in person. It was trippy because I've gotten to know them really well, and suddenly you're standing next to people. The only thing that was unexpected though is height. Like in Zoom, you don't figure out how high people are, and people were taller or shorter than expected.
you do you find that when you get out after 14 months and you get out and you're happy to see people again, that you feel out of practice with regard to socializing and mixing with people and handshaking and introductions and even, dare I say it, networking? You find that you feel out of practice, a little awkward, as though perhaps you need to practice? Like, does it, do you ever get that? You feel a little like out of place, a fish out of water after 14 months of solitary confinement?
Absolutely. I got out of the car, walked up to the security guy, and since I do go out to the grocery store and doctor's appointments, stuff like that, so that was normal. But then I heard, "Hey, Caleb," and that's the first time someone had shouted my name in over a year. And I walked over to the car, and the drummer was there. He's like, "Hey, man." And he put out his hand. And in my mind, I was like, oh, I'm just getting out. I'm going to elbow bump. I got to stay safe. And before I knew it, I'm shaking his hand. It's just instinct. But I'm looking at my arm doing this thing. Like it was like a disembodied thing. Like it was acting of its own accord. And my mind's going, hey, I thought you weren't going to do that. And all this internal dialogue's going. And then suddenly I'm not shaking his hand. And all of a sudden my mind's like, did you shake his hand firmly? I'm like, this is, yeah, total awkwardness. And then, I walked around the front, people are masked, I'm masked, and they check the temperature and give you a, sticker that you've been cleared to join the event. And so that was cool. The other thing is, since I work for the band, I was in a VIP section, and so I'm coming in there introducing myself. I'm not on a list or anything. It's just, hey, I'm with the band. This is who I am, and they're like, oh, okay, right this way, and so it's also my first time being out social, but it's not a casual thing. It's almost like a little. They're kind of the local rock stars, so because I work with them, I'm getting a little rock star treatment, which is its own trippiness, right? So yeah, it was a bunch of layers of trippy, and also you're sitting in chairs in these little pods, 4 people each, and you're staring at a jumbo jet which has a stage. So many levels of awkward weirdness.
It would feel awkward. Yesterday, after work, I went to a very large motorcycle rally in Oakland. The East Bay Dragons were holding their annual 3-day party for Memorial Day, and it would have felt awkward, except A, we all remembered each other. B, it felt nostalgic, and that became the outrigger that would otherwise make handshaking and introductions and reintroductions quite awkward. We knew each other, we remembered each other, and the waves of nostalgia kind of greased the wheels, as it were. So otherwise, it would have felt very awkward. It felt like a reunion, and that's probably one of the few things that kept it from feeling completely and utterly awkward. Like looking at each other and saying, "Hey, I think I know you," but it was like a homecoming and like a reunion, and everybody, there was so many clubs and lots of respect, and it was great. We ended up going out to dinner with a few guys in North Oakland, and that felt wonderful. And it felt very heartfelt, enough so that I was home by 10 p.m. and it felt like a full night. And but
Wow.
today, out with a bicycle ride at the Berkeley Marina all by myself on a bicycle, the practiced introversy is still in effect. So it's being alone is now second nature as well.
I went out to a sushi restaurant on Tuesday, and that was my first time sitting down in a restaurant. And then on Friday, we went to the Arboretum and just walked around in public with people around, and went to a little cafe after. It's yeah.
It's amazing, little things like remembering to tip the wait staff, as an example.
Oh, I'll never forget that. I waited table. I mean, I bussed tables at the Red Lion Inn for a couple years there, and so I always tip well. Well, I'm glad you're safe. I'm safe. Alex has been fully vaccinated and waited her 2 weeks, technically this Tuesday. So we feel like we can start going out and doing things. And she had brought a lunch with, brought food with her when we were walking around the Arboretum. And I'm like, no, I'm taking you to lunch. And there was that little like, oh, right, we can do that. Okay. Yeah. So a little bit of that thaw, a little bit of that feeling like everything's familiar, but everything's foreign all at the same time. Or maybe even that it's a reunion that's never happened. It's like a reunion, and yet you've never really done it before. I think that's the way of describing it.
Absolutely. Yes.
Well, having said all that, let's see what's going on in Oregon. Our guest today is in Portland, I believe. We'll see when we bring her on if I got that right. And that guest is Stephanie Strange of Strange and the Familiars, singer, songwriter, and performer. Stephanie, you out there?
I am. I am here.
Are you in Portland?
I am in Portland, Northeast Portland, Oregon. Yeah.
All right. I got it right. I'm up in Seattle, just north of Seattle, and Joe is in Berkeley, just on the other side of the bay from San Francisco.
Nice. We make a nice line.
Yes, we have if we got my friend Chris down in LA, we'd have the whole West Coast.
Let's do it. Let's take it over.
So have you been getting out?
Yeah, I mean, within reason, I've been getting out. I've been doing a lot outdoors. It's really easy to do that in Portland. I have played outdoor shows whenever they were available throughout quarantine, which was about maybe every 3 or 4 months, which is not even close. I was playing 2 shows a month before it all started. And then there's a lot of places with outdoor seating that take really good precautions. So, but in terms of talking to strangers, going out by yourself and meeting new people, going to shows, I really haven't, and I can't wait. I just can't wait. I love meeting new people. Abrasive, awkward, anything. I'll take it. I love it.
Abrasive.
Abrasive, awkward, the whole gamut. Give it to me.
You're like, I understand the whole gamut, but you started with abrasive. That was your number one pick. It was like
I might have been thinking about myself.
Oh.
Just slightly. You don't know where the edge is until you go past it a little bit.
You don't strike me as abrasive, but okay, maybe on the, it's like smooth sailing, and then you get out to the shore of the lake, and it's really jagged rocks.
Yeah, or like you're swimming in a nice calm ocean, and then a shark comes and tugs you down.
I see. Go out and see a Stephanie Strange show.
You gotta do it.
It will be like swimming in a calm lake and then having a shark pull you down.
I call it the tickle punch. I give you a little tickle, and then when you least expect it, and then a nice tickle again.
I see. That's your musical is that the way you compose songs? You're like, I'm gonna do this in a tickle punch way, and then when you perform live, you also apply this philosophy.
It's not a philosophy. It's just what I've observed. I do. It's not conscious. It's just a thing that happens.
So you're conscious that your unconscious behavior is tickle punch.
Correct.
And is that also available as a cocktail?
I mean, isn't anything available as a cocktail if you pay enough money?
Fair enough. Fair enough. All right, folks, we'll be looking in the after party for a recipe for tickle punch that you can request at your local bar, because you'll be allowed to go to one soon. So I don't know if you were listening in there. I was talking to Joe yesterday. I actually went out and shook hands. It was very, very unusual. Yeah.
Yeah, I had that too. I went to a friend's birthday party last night. I got off my shift at work and drove over, brought friends a bunch of pizzas, and everybody was a couple sheets to the wind at that point. And somebody put out their hand to shake, and I took it because it was an egregious offense to not take someone's hand if they put it out to shake before the pandemic. So it's just automatic to do it. And as you're shaking it, there's this like, oh, we're not supposed to do this anymore. And then I'm being polite, but where's that hand sanitizer?
Totally, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, and everybody was looking at each other like, should we do this? Are we gonna elbow bump? A couple of people elbow bumped me, and then other people were just kind of like, really? Come on. And then you feel a little
Yeah.
pressure, but yeah, it's so instinctual in our culture. As I was saying to Joe earlier, it was almost like you said, conscious awareness of something you're doing unconsciously. I'm consciously watching my hand go out and shake. And Joe, there's a Peter Gabriel song in there for you, if you can guess the reference later on. Yeah, and then we're in this, large metal structure with a Boeing 747 and bands playing and people dancing in little 4-chair pods, which
Oh,
is
those pictures you sent were so cool. I was like, who is this guy that he's going to an airport for private shows?
I'm the guy getting their social media in order. That's
Very nice. Very nice. Very important.
I tease them. They've always had a very professional show, but when they first called me and said, "Hey, we need help," and I said, "Okay, I've looked at your stuff. I can help you." It was like you would go to Instagram or YouTube or Facebook, and they would have a different logo. So you're like, I don't even know if is this the same band? Yeah, okay, it's the same guys. And the logo had the title of the band in the logo, which made the logo off center. They had a nice logo that like a stamp that would fit in the middle. And I'm like, okay, take it down, remove the bottom. It already has text to the right. Now you've got this stamp. This is the seal of approval. Da 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 da. Do all the backgrounds, do the playlists, setups and whatnot. So yeah. So at this point, a year on, the drummer says I'm in his cell phone called Caleb Get Shit Done. It's my official
Very
name.
nice. I like that. That's a really good title.
Yeah.
I have a folder in my Google Drive called Get Your Shit Together, and it's all my most important stuff. So maybe I just need to forward that to you.
And I'm willing to let you know my rates and we can work something out.
Oh, I don't pay. I'm just kidding.
I don't work for free anymore, so
That's good. That's good. I don't either.
I'll give you some
shouldn't.
free hours. I always do more than I charge. But even the lead singer of the band, he was on the show, and one of the things he said on the show was, "You should charge more." He's telling me I should charge more. So
Mm-hmm. It's such an interesting thing, that the pay rate, because I couldn't get people to buy a $5 ticket for the life of me before the pandemic. And now with the shows that we've had, it's raised to 15, 20 per show. And people are it's like this reset happened where there seems to be, in general, people valuing each other more, from performers to audiences to venue owners to people providing services. There's less of this sort of like, oh, I could get it cheaper, or that's a little expensive, and more like, all right, let's do this thing. You are worth that.
nice. That's great. I've heard some people talk about the space this last year, and that online shows have created a new venue in space, but I haven't heard someone say that it's changed the culture to find greater value in live music.
Yeah, I'm feeling that hard. And every show is very precious because everybody's so excited to be there. And it's not about how much they paid. It's about being the experience of being with their friends and taking in this energy and being able to talk afterwards. And yeah, sometimes I would rush off after a show, and these days, like, you gotta ditch me. I'll take it. I'll take talking after a show for 3 hours.
That is very cool. we've been talking a lot about what will the new normal be on Balanced Breakfast. Or, people in the beginning were like, oh, okay, we're going to do this Zoom thing for a while. Then we're going to go back to how things were. And it's clear that's not happening. And it's like, okay, now we're going to be in this hybrid. And what does that hybrid mean? And folks have talked about how, well, Zoom gives me my international audience, but performing live will reconnect me with my local audience. And that's the hybrid. But I love this idea that a deeper value shift has happened, where people are saying,
Yeah.
I value you. I want you to keep doing these shows so we can connect.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I don't think I'm the only one who feels the way of it's kind of a joy to make it rain. I work really hard for my money, and then to find an artist that I want to work with, a sound engineer, and it's like, I'm going to give you so much money, and you're going to make something so good, and let's just keep doing this thing.
This is cool. This is really cool. My mind's kind of jumping all around with this idea. I love the idea of that. By reducing options, people have come to appreciate artists more.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing to wrap your head around, because Portland, I'm not sure about other cities, but I know for Portland, there was this idea of oversaturation. I said that for years. It's just oversaturated. You try to play a club and they lowball you because there's 200 performers who will do it for free. They'll do it for 2 drink tickets. But that's what makes Portland such a rich scene, is that there's so many artists at all these different stages of experience and growth. And there's been this interesting distilling. So it's really cool right now. And I'm really curious to see where it's going to go. And I hope that permanent changes take place in some ways. We'll see.
I wonder, how are the venues doing in Portland? I mean, I imagine everybody's
the
shut down.
smaller venues, small to mid-level venues, especially ones that can be outdoor, are doing, I think, okay right now. There's a couple places that are about mid-sized venues, mid to small, doing really well, and like kind of bearing the brunt of how many musicians there are in town and trying to book. Sort of a Mad Max situation amongst musicians right now. But the larger venues are struggling, which is tough. You just can't squeeze that many people inside right now. So Jim Brunberg is kind of spearheading this campaign to help distribute funds to larger venues and local businesses and to help them keep going. There's just really, really good stuff happening here, trying to get it back to where it is, because we have done as much as we can, and we just can't do more until we can get a bunch of people into a big room safely. And I love small shows. I love open mics. I love all different levels of things, but it's also really nice. We had a show booked at the OMSI Planetarium here in Portland before COVID, and it's this huge planetarium, and I want to play that show, but we're not going to be able to do it until more people get vaccinated and we can get, more folks in.
Well, until that day comes, you can continue to perform in the backyard. And I want to show folks your latest video, hot off the press, released today. And
that's right. And actually, I uploaded it today.
I think it really captures the COVID performance vibe and of our time. So let's play that and introduce folks to your music.
The sky, she is falling, the oceans, they are rising. It's time we started realizing it was man who doomed the world. It was not the monkeys, nor was it the birds in the trees. It was not the fishes, it was you and it was me. the zombies, turns out. It was not the robots, not yet. It was not the zombie robots, but wouldn't that have been kinda sweet? Come on, you know that would have been pretty sweet. It started long ago. We were doomed the moment greed took hold. And since then we've all just been along for the ride. Now the sky, she is falling. The oceans, they are rising. And everything around us is dying. And to the left you'll see there's an island made of plastic. Don't mind the turtles, they're just suffocating. And straight ahead you'll see the ice caps, they are melting. But it's nice to get some decent weather for a change. The price we pay for such beautiful imaginations. Never so much pain, never so much pain. Oh, the price we pay for such brilliant minds. Never so much pain, never so much pain. Oh, the things we say when we should hold each other dearly. Never so much pain, never so much pain. Oh. I can't help but calls them like I sees them. They say if you can't join them, you should beat them. And my famous right hook looks an awful lot like a song. But I'd hate to leave you crying. Lord knows I wish that I was lying. But the least that I can do is give you a better view. Well, the moon, she is rising. The oceans, they are rising too. And long after we're gone, they'll still be dancing. Yes, the moon, she is rising. The oceans, they are rising too. And long after we're gone, they'll still be dancing. They'll be dancing. They'll still be dancing.
That was Strange and the Familiars by Stephanie Strange, the man who doomed the world. Maybe a little David Bowie reference there? No?
Actually, not intentional. Anyway,
All right.
No.
This video you dropped and messaged me this afternoon. I dropped it in the show and I listened to it. And man, there's so many things to unpack here. First of all, we talking about COVID and how it shifted the music scene and whatnot. it's like this video would have seemed kind of like you were being ironic that you were out in front of a garden gate, but now it's like you're capturing that performing at home vibe, but it's shot like a professional video. So it has
Right.
these multiple elements coming into that. And it just struck me that there are a lot of creative decisions that would not have happened pre-COVID that are in this video. And because you're out on the street, you hear the dog barking, you hear maybe a kid at some point, and it just, those are things in the studio. Usually you have to think, oh, okay, the song's getting a little boring. Let's add a little dog bark here, and to keep
Right.
people's ears interested. And it's naturally happening in this video.
Right. And without a band, which is not usually how I perform. It was actually Jordan Henline is the one who took the video, and he and I made an official music video with like a storyline earlier in the year that I haven't released yet. But he lives, a couple blocks away from me, and he's a wonderful filmmaker. And I called him up and asked if he wanted to do a photo shoot, and he was like, "Well, I brought my ear trumpet microphones, which are beautiful vintage mics, and I brought my video in case you want to do this." So it was really impromptu. I wasn't really expecting it, and all I knew is that I wanted to capture the cherry blossom trees because we have two in front of the house, and they are so gorgeous, and they only bloom and fall for 2 weeks of the year. So it's such an ephemeral time and so magical, and I just wanted to catch it while I could.
Wow, that just adds even more depth to this. The
It
fact that
really suited the song. Yeah.
yeah, and he captured those tight shots of them dropping to the ground, and
Mhm.
did a fantastic job of the storyboard and how he framed it. I love it. I think it's a fantastic video on so many different levels. Song is great. One thing I like about this particular song is its apparent asymmetry. I don't know if on sheet music, if it would look like verse, chorus, but I would listen to it because of how you're changing up the lyrics. You're doing like this chunk, and not necessarily going back, right? You have sort of mini choruses, kind of like verses with a thing that's acting as a chorus, and then you're going on to another verse, and then there's a new chorus.
Yes. Yeah. That's pretty typical for me, songwriting wise. I don't, I just let it come. I let it do its thing and flow. I have a friend of mine, we were talking recently, and he described it really nicely. He was like, I like that you just let the universe move through you. People have always said I'm raw, and I used to bother me, and now it doesn't bother me at all. Let's just let it come. It doesn't really have a structure. I'm not trying to do anything. I just kind of, there it goes. And it's definitely not any kind of traditional song structure.
Cool. Well, keep doing it. I think it's a great strength, and it doesn't come across as, well, speaking of Bowie, he would do a thing where he would write some songs traditionally, but then some he would use like a computer program that he had that would just jumble up a bunch of words. And then he would sing that, and you'd get these,
Isn't that interesting?
yeah, these chaotic things. It started with cutting up pieces of paper. As Anton Brennan, the surrealist, I think he wrote the Manifesto for Surrealism. So I forget. Anyhow, he would cut things up, pick things out of a hat. That was where that came from. And then of course Brian Geisen invented the cut up technique where you'd put stacks of paper and you just cut through the paper. And then he taught William S. Burroughs that technique, and famously Burroughs wrote Naked Lunch and a bunch of things that way. And so Bowie had those influences. The thing that strikes me, and I've done pieces, I've done some stuff that way. Early on, with a lot of tracks during a certain period, I just opened my mouth and whatever came out, came out. And some was nonsensical, some were words I had to look up in the dictionary. I didn't even know where they came from. And then at some point I was like, oh, I got to sit down and learn how to rhyme and learn how to structure things. And what you're doing is somewhere in between. It's got clear structure, but it's also not, very formulaic either. And you'll go for a rhyme will happen, and then a rhyme won't happen, but I don't feel it's because you couldn't think up of a rhyme. And I don't feel
Right.
like you were intentionally trying to be non-rhymey. It just happened that way. And I'm okay with that.
Right.
It's very natural
Yeah.
for you.
It is. It's more about the storytelling and what I'm the lyrical content, and I tend to structure the rest of the song around that. And the same with my bandmates. When we work on arrangements, they steer clear of the lyrics, not just because lyricists hate that, singers hate it, but because that's the meat of it. And the A section is going to be so different than the B section, but you really have to understand what's happening lyrically to get the structure of the song.
So the story is number one.
Yes, definitely. Absolutely.
Very cool.
No doubt.
Speaking of arrangements, you have done not only singer-songwriter stuff, playing in front of band stuff, but next I want to play She's a Nightmare, which is a string quartet arrangement. Can you tell us a little bit how this
Yeah.
came about?
Sure. Well, that's a good question. My producer Tim and I, and he's a bandmate as well, we wanted to capture this, and the song kind of lends itself to this orchestral feeling. And Portland has no lack of amazingly talented musicians. So we pulled together Emily Dalfoist, Kirsten Tornfelt, and Kate O'Brien. And there was 2 violins and a cello. And Tim wrote the arrangement for it. And we just went to the studio to capture it because at that point I didn't have a ton of material, and it was a song that we've been sitting on. We have a EP to release with the official recording on it, but wanted to get something out there a lot sooner. So we came together and we rehearsed it, and it's about my cat. The whole Strange World kind of sprung from her in a lot of ways, inspired. A lot of this stuff is inspired by nature, animals, in and of themselves, but as a metaphor for humanity, as a mirror for our own problems. And this dark, whimsical world kind of grows up around it. So She's a Nightmare was, I think, the very first song that came to make the strange world, which is what the universe is that I work in. Because I have an illustrator named Jay Reynolds and write comic books. So we wrote a mini comic book based on the cat. And then we have a 26-page comic book coming out with the next EP. And the EP and the comic book are going to tie together. They echo each other in a lot of ways, and the story is very complete with both of them together.
Cool. Well, here is a glimpse into the strange world. This is called She's a Nightmare.
She walks in your dreams while you are sleeping in places best left unseen. She dances with skeletons in your closet, the monsters under your bed. She's a nightmare. She might be worse than the things that she fights. She's a nightmare. It's quite likely she's worse than the things that come out when you turn off the lights. She's no innocent. No, she's no innocent. She's a nightmare. You're thinking, what did I invite into my bed? And you're right to wonder. You're right to be scared, 'cause you've got a nightmare. Demons scatter wherever she roams. Yes, you've got a nightmare. But while she'll make your dreams right, she can't speak to the monsters that walk in the light. She's no innocent. No, she's no innocent.
That was She's a Nightmare by Strange and the Familiars. So this whole Strange World started with one particular cat, right? It's gotten broader, but that was that particular cat. What was that cat's name?
Nina Nightmare.
What was that?
Her name was Nina Nightmare.
Nina Nightmare.
And before we get too far, I just want to say that my best friend filmed that video. She came over to the house and captured Nina and came into the studio. And, oh, such a natural. She did such a beautiful job. So in a lot of ways, we were able to kind of scrap this one together. But yes, I lived in a neighborhood in Northeast Portland that had the largest feral cat population in the entire city.
Ah, okay.
Yes. So there were always kittens around, and I have grown up with cats. I'm a cat lover, and I lost a cat like years and years before. So I'd thought about adopting one of the cats here or there, but they were all, running around and outside, and none of them quite fit. And one day, I was walking home late at night, and next to my yard, there was two houses, my house, the neighbor's house, and a side yard. And there were 3 chairs surrounding a fire pit where we all used to sit and hang out. And I looked over, and in each chair was a black cat. 3 black cats sitting in these chairs, and they were all looking at each other like they were talking or communicating. And that's what I felt like. I felt like I'd interrupted them. And over the course of the next couple of weeks, these stories started blooming because these 3 black cats were always together, and they were always so mysterious. And we never saw them as baby kittens. We only saw them when they were already into their teens, for cats anyway. And as the story started blooming, Strange and the Familiars, Stephanie Strange, it all kind of came up together. And one day, Nina, before her name was Nina Nightmare, came, and I was reading on the porch, and she plopped herself on my chest, and I knew she was my cat. And I brought her in, and she was pretty feral. She was my roommates were not super stoked about it. She was named Nightmare for a reason. But then the world just became so rich and internal and really based on healing some trauma that I'd had, and these deeply personal, dark things. And this world really helped me heal and helped guide me to somebody who I wanted to be. I love fantasy. I love science fiction. I love comic books. So in imagining this world, I was imagining somebody who I wanted to be and could be, and slowly came closer to being that person because of this cat in this world and the imagination.
I'm always fascinated when someone in fandom transitions to the other side and then produces material that generates fandom. Mm-hmm. And you just described that journey. Mm-hmm. And in our earlier chat, I don't know if you've 100% like in yourself recognized that you've arrived at that. There's like some part of you that's still like, I maybe, we talk about this imposter syndrome stuff in Balanced Breakfast and whatnot. I don't know if it's that element, but I just want to know you've arrived. Like I got it. One of the reasons I invited you on the show is like, oh, this person's transitioned to that and they've got this thing and they've got this whole world that they're building and I'm a fan of it. And I know that there's some stuff coming and maybe, you know, some stuff is being held back, but I'm watching because I like what I see here. So
Thank you.
you got
Yes,
last-
I appreciate that.
I'm sure Joe agrees.
That last song is a great example. It's sort of like elements of Unwoman and Abney Park. Very,
Oh,
absolutely. With a little Stefan Grappelli thrown in. All inspired by a patio coven of cats.
oh my goodness. Joe, you and I need to talk. I need to get your email so you can recommend some music to me because I'm intrigued.
And you hear how he just wordsmithed that.
Oh, yes.
The patio coven
Oh,
of
yeah.
cats.
Patio of cats. I didn't miss that.
And that's on one coffee.
Oh, let's get you on 6. Let's bump it up to cocaine and see what happens.
Hey, you don't want to overdo your Joe. You want to
French
keep your,
Adderall, that's me.
Thanks.
otherwise then the Joe falls off the bike. We want to keep Joe on the
Fair
bike.
enough. You do not want that to happen. You want your Joe on your bike.
Exactly. Well, here is another song, and this one's not about cats. This is the cat telling you where it's at. Here we go.
This feast better be fancy!
This feast, it better be fancy. When I say fancy, I mean schmancy. Put on your tuxedo pantsy. Hard food, don't romance me. This feast, it better be fancy. Oh, it better be fancy. Winner, chicken dinner. Won't you change my kitty litter? This feast, it better be fancy. Oh, it better be fancy. This feast, it better be fancy. Oh, it better be fancy. So keep your kibbles, keep your bits. Don't you make me beg for it.
Don't you make me beg for it. Don't you make me beg for it.
This feast, it better be fancy. Oh, it better be fancy. This feast, it better be fancy. Oh, it better be fancy. This feast, it better be fancy. Oh, it better be fancy. This feast, it better be fancy. Oh, it better be fancy.
Hiss, hiss. Hiss, hiss. Hiss, hiss. Hiss, hiss.
I won't eat no store brand. Let me help you understand. Oh, it better be fancy. Oh, it better be fancy. I will bite the hand that feeds me. Keep your chicken of the sea. Oh, it better be fancy. Oh, it better be fancy. You can shake that bag till the cows come home, but you will be sleeping alone. Oh, it better be fancy. Oh, it better be fancy. Oh, it better be fancy. This feast, it better be fancy. Oh, it better be fancy.
Hiss, hiss.
Oh, it better be fancy.
Hiss, hiss.
Oh, it better be fancy.
So I'm assuming that Nina was pretty picky
Pretty what?
about
Picky.
her food.
Quite the contrary.
No.
The attitude is reflected in the song, but she loved a lot of food. She loved human food. I could not bring an avocado in the house. I had a flat of blueberries once, and then I took a nap, and when I woke up, she had her face, and she was just mowing down on these blueberries. And my shopping bag, I brought it home one day and there were 2 avocados at the top. And I went upstairs for a moment and I came back down and she had nibbled a hole into each avocado as if to say, I own you and I do what I want. And you take care of my trash.
The queen of the coven. And then in the video, there were 3 cats. I assume they represent the 3 cats that were hanging out at the fire pit.
Yes, Nicholas Nightmare, also known as the Preacher. Ned Nightmare is the middle cat, and Nina Nightmare is the youngest and the prettiest.
And the one who likes avocados and blueberries. That's,
Oh, yes. The
well,
queen who stole my heart.
yeah, I mean, I've never heard of a cat really going for fruits and vegetables.
Oh, she was an interesting beast. I didn't just, I am very imaginative and I invested a lot in her and was able to kind of build on this world. But she was a very interesting cat in a lot of ways. She inspired things with, it wasn't all me. It was both of us.
She was a co-creator of this world that you're developing.
Yes.
So when does the comic book come out?
I'm really hoping this year. We started creating the comic book and the next EP right before quarantine, right before we heard about this little thing called coronavirus. And the studio that we started out in, Feng Shui in Vancouver, run by Patrick Teetrault, if I'm pronouncing that right, it went under right after our first session. And it was such a beautiful session. We recorded some stand-up bass, electric guitar. Anders Bergstrom came in with this amazing drum kit. He laid down basic drums, and then he filled up half the room with these world instruments. He created such a beautiful soundscape just with the drums. And we have so many beautiful, it's a very orchestrated, whimsical, but just high quality thing. But the answer is I don't know. I'm really hoping soon. We have a couple pieces left, and the studio situation has been, we've sort of bounced around all over the place, and it's a quarantine album. I think it's going to be beautiful when it's done, and it's really, really tested my patience too, because I'm a make it and put it out. Don't worry about the bells and whistles. This is something that just came out of me and I need to communicate it to the world. So this has been a new experience of sitting on something, revisiting it, and dealing with insecurities that might come up when you sit and wait with something, which is really good and mature to do. So it's been great.
I wouldn't know anything about what you're talking about.
Nothing. No. This is unique to me.
There
are no other artists.
I just sit back. I let it happen, however it wants to happen.
Right. Yes.
Oh, that's tough. That's my one tough. I think for me personally, the toughest song release story I had was I had a track that I was like, oh man, this is finally something like a little commercial. This track people are gonna like. And this was like my big pop moment. And this guy's doing a remix of this track, and it sounds great. He mixes it. I go to the studio. Oh my goodness, this is awesome. This is the song I've been wanting to have on my albums or available to balance out my more artsy stuff. And then he ran some mastering software on it and was going to give me the file, and it totally just destroyed the mix. I'm like, hey, just take that stuff off. I can master it out later. He goes, no, man, it's been a long day. I just shutting down. I don't want to shut down the computer and go home. We'll do this tomorrow. And tomorrow was September 11th. And the studio closed and laid him off, and the original files were never seen.
Oh, my goodness.
And all I did, I had this really inferior quality file. That's all I had. And so what I did is I put a crowd noise behind it and called it live version and put like reverb just over the whole thing so that it sounded like it was in a big place and put it at the end of an album. I was like, okay, fine. Right. So yeah, it's, I've had so much technology or situations fail on my studio stuff. I'm always like, okay, I'm worried. I want it done and out because at least it exists. So
that's a real thing. I've worked with people who are perfectionists, very, very good musicians, but can't let anything go because nothing's ever quite perfect enough. And that is, for me, not great because it disappears. It's very brief, these little spurts of where the magic exists in there. And my guitarist, Mark Bowden, I've been working with him for years and friend, he got it. He's got so much figured out, and I didn't realize it until recently. Like things are coming back to me. Of he said it's all just taking pictures. It's like a snapshot of the moment of the song. It's probably not your best song that's going to change the entire world, but it's a picture and a snapshot, and you're going to want it, and it's going to document all this stuff. And that is, I try not to linger in regrets too much, but moving forward anyway, I'm not going to like beat myself up for wanting to get stuff out, because sometimes that's the right thing to do, is just get it out there, and then it's there and it lives and you can move on.
You can move on, or you can revisit. I keep telling artists I'm working with that are sitting on their work and not releasing it. In fact, I'm thinking right now of one person, Jai, if you're out there, did you ever release that EP? That was 10 years ago. The tweaking, perfecting, no, I want to make it right. And I keep telling them, nowadays you can have 2.0. There's nothing stopping you from iterating. And I'm thinking way back to a friend of mine, Michael Blakely. He's a big fan of a group called The Residents. Every Christmas, they would put out a single called Santa Dog. So he told me, and he would collect each one of these. And it was this kind of loose interpretation of this one song every year they put out for Christmas. And that was my first time going, oh, you can just keep revisiting things, you know? And so sometimes, you know, put it out and then you can come back and put out a new version in a year. And I also understand if you want to, you know, you want your perfect version, and you're going to wait a year to get that, but just know that you can wait a year to get that and also still put stuff out.
Yeah, you know, I think it depends on the song and the time and where you're at. And um, sometimes you don't have enough resources to make something perfectly. And sometimes you don't realize it's perfect just the way it is, that there's nothing that's going to improve that rawness that comes out in the moment. And yeah, I mean, I have a love-hate relationship with it, because I tend to be fueled by that thing that happens when you're creating, and struggling in my life to run on more than that, because I think that's really important, to have a different foundation than just I'm feeling it in the moment. But there's a magic there for sure.
Definitely. And we have so many options nowadays, which brings its own challenges, but overall, there's no excuse not to do something. This is why I wanted to drop a little pin in that fandom becoming creator. I know a lot of famous people who are fans. Like, you know, Gary Newman has been famous since he was 17, and he's also a sci-fi movie and TV show geek, right? Just because you do doesn't mean you have to stop being in fandom. But I find folks like myself who grew up in fandom, listening to others do it, and then working for years to do it myself, there's always this little feeling of what I'm doing is not on par with them or something like that. And, you know, I'm just, hopefully one of the themes of this year of this show is to let that go out and do something, because if you want to publish a book, Lulu will publish single copies off. You just have to write it and upload it. You want to release an album, you can launch GarageBand, which comes free with every Macintosh, produce your album, and release it the next day. This is all available.
And it is. And I think the expectation of everything being received really well and having this widespread thing, maybe that's more the problem than just putting stuff out as it comes. But personally, I've always been very honest and open about my personal life and my struggles, because I think it's important to put it out there so that people don't feel like they're the only ones who struggle with pain or mental illness or addiction. We're all in this together, but it's not talked about as often as I think it could be or even should be. And so in some ways, my audience in Portland over the last 14, 15 years has seen me grow immensely and go through pain. And that's been very transparent. And they're like family now, because they've been there through all of it. And I don't regret being open, and I don't regret being vulnerable at all. I don't think it's any great thing. And sometimes people be like, "Oh, you're so brave." Like, get out of here. I'm just, here it is. I'm giving it to you here.
Yeah.
But it's good. I think it's good. And the audience gets to be a part of that. Like, I'm not interested in these super polished pieces of people who are, it's their perfect product. Everything is just so. I want to see the cracks. I want to see the bits of frayed string. I want to see the struggles and the stuffing. And sometimes I want to see it unravel a little bit, because then when you put it together, it's so much more powerful. And yeah, that's who I am as an artist, which is, I just love the flaws. I love the frailty. I think it's all a part of it. I can see Joe agrees.
Yes, it's handmade. It's handmade.
Yeah.
It's not synthesized. And
It's
it shows
not.
that human touch.
Yeah.
Imperfection is perfection. Edith
It
Piaf
is.
said,
Yeah.
Edith Piaf said it best: use your faults, your defects, then you will become a star.
That's beautiful. I love that. Yeah. And lean in. We were talking about that before it started. Go ahead and lean into that weirdness and the strangeness. It's all right. It's good. Yeah. Trying to get away from it is going to create this sense of falseness. And there's plenty of that in the world. There's plenty of this plastic produced material.
Plastic
in there.
produced people.
Mm-hmm.
That works if you're erasure, but otherwise.
Right.
I would.
Exactly.
Oh, I'm going to challenge you on that one, Joe. But we got the mystic moment. It's the top of the hour. I will challenge you in the after party. So let's put a pin in the erasure comment there. I was going to make a Pet Shop Boys comment, and I held back. But we'll talk about Pet Shop Boys, erasure, and get back on topic to our guest after the mystic moment. This week, the mystic moment is Stare at Shadows. Folks who watch the show know every week I challenge you to look forward to your coming week with a different pair of glasses on. And this week we've been talking a lot about our shadow side, our what we might perceive as a weakness or as a challenge or an unpolished side of ourselves. And that, in fact, these are strengths. If you're always staring at the light and going towards the light, you get only half the picture. A coin has two sides. So make sure you take time to stare at the shadows. Stare at your own fears. Stare at your own negative perceptions of yourself. And like regular shadows, you'll find that they're pretty two-dimensional. And they're not going to hurt you. Shadows don't actually do anything but provide a image that is created by the light. That was your mystic moment of the week. We are now going to go into the after party. As you can see here, we have comments. Go ahead and comment. And if you have any questions for our guest in the after party, we will make sure we get you the answers. Well, welcome to the after party, folks. This is where we loosen up, unbutton the top button, and go a little more off the rail and off topic, and also dig into some other aspects of the artist of the week. We are here this week with Stephanie Strange of Strange and the Familiars, and we were talking about music production. When do you release? When do you hold back and continue to polish your work? And Joe made some slide comment about the band Erasure being plasticky. I disagree. I think the reason why Vince Clarke is, the founder of Depeche Mode, Erasure, Yazoo, why those records still sell is even though they're totally electronic, there's a human quality to what he does with those synths. And then my other comment was on Pet Shop Boys. Their first hit was a song called West End Girls, and they released that single 3 times before it got charted. So they mixed it, released it, flopped. Next year, mixed it, released it, flopped. And they kept their day job while they were just reworking that track. And that allowed it to be perfected so that it went into the top 10 and they got, a whole career out of that. So there is something to be said about get things out, release, but also if you think that there's a there, keep working on it. And there's no reason you can't re-release. But and then there's other work that it's great that the artist actually took the time to really develop and hone it into a thing. And when you put that much investment, you want to put the marketing campaign behind that. You want to, get the messages out to the press or whatever support you're going to do. You want build buzz with the fans, right? If you're just dropping stuff every week, I personally think while the culture is very catered to that right now, it's like, give me another Instagram picture, give me another single. After a while, it waters down. I don't know. It can go either way. It could be keeping your fan fed, or it could be like, yeah, they put out a song every week. And if you're not keeping it fresh, I don't know. Maybe I'm a little old school in that.
I mean, I intend to be old school too, so I'm not sure. This might just be we're bouncing off each other. But I've had this disagreement with especially men who have been in the music industry for a long time, who I work with, of, content is king. And I get it. And it's not like I'm saying that's wrong, but producing content for the sake of having something, doing it formulaically, doing it every 2 weeks, making sure that people stay involved and feeding that ADD machine of our culture. I'm not into it. I'm not into that whole thing. I can feel it when other people are doing it to a formula and when it's too much. And I can feel it when I'm doing it. And it doesn't matter. It's weird because you get that positive feedback when you do it. There are people who are always there online to say, this is so great, and da-da-da-da. And the more you put out, the more you get. But it sure does feel an awful lot like any kind of addiction, throwing something into the void. And, I'm not sure that maybe it's a long game. Maybe I don't know that, but I'd rather put out quality stuff instead of trying to just pump it out, have the content. There it is. There's plenty of material for people to take in. And it's so much.
I describe it as breathing, right? You can't always be breathing in. And you're feeding...
Yeah, the ebb and flow.
Yeah, you're feeding the fans, but also you're creating hunger from the fans. Feeding the fans, hunger from the fans, so that there's this natural flow. If you're just feeding it, it reminds me of that Lucille Ball skit where she's in the chocolate factory and the chocolates start coming out faster. So she starts eating them to try to manage the situation. I could see that happening.
Absolutely. It's being an artist, I'm sure you know this, that you learn to trust the ebb, even though it's uncomfortable. And that is something that I've relied on. Sometimes I'm more into the business side of it, and I'm just working hard at making connections and booking, building my career. But if that creative flow comes, whether it's writing a new song or in a performance way, I go with it and I try to enjoy it. And then I try to trust that ebb as well. And I don't know, maybe in today's world you do lose people, but what are we doing it for? We're not doing it to have as many fans as we possibly can. At least I'm not.
With this show, I think
Excellent point.
with this show, I was told if you start this thing, make sure you do it every weekend. Don't skip a weekend. You'll lose momentum. So I think that there is a something there in the framework sense. So like as a record label, make sure you're regularly releasing things on the label. But it doesn't have to always be the same artist. And this show, in the beginning, a friend of mine called me and the idea was I would perform live every weekend. And I think at a certain point, people go, oh, I can just tune in next week. It's going to be him singing again. But by having different artists and having the regularity of that, but each week being different. Last week or week before was a a cyberpunk science fiction writer, right? So you have
yeah.
variation into, I'm going to tune in this week. Oh, it's a writer. That's different. Okay. So there's ways, I think, of keeping interest without becoming a factory just pumping out chocolates into your fan base's mouth.
Yeah, absolutely. Consistency, not my forte, but obviously very important and something that I've been working on my adult life when I've been able to. But yeah, I don't know. I think losing focus of the quality of what you're putting out and the reason you're putting it out is not good either.
All three videos I played in the first half of the show are of quality, but they're different. Obviously, they maybe came from different productions, different times in your life, but it shows like that you can write different kinds of songs and produce different kinds of songs.
Yeah, there's a lot of facets for sure, and I think that probably hasn't helped me because it's not succinct and it's not clear. I don't put out one thing and the audience understands it. I played with one of my favorite people and musicians in the whole world. It was like 3 months into us playing where she was like, oh, I got the lyrics to this song. I finally listened to the lyrics and I got it. And she'd heard it innumerable times. And so that's hard to ask of people, is to stick around. I'm just going to give you a piece of it. I don't believe in spoon feeding people. I do. It's there. We spoon feed people all the time, but I don't do it. And that's asking an awful lot of people these days. So I guess I want more people to hear the music, but you got to meet me too. I'll meet you, you meet me. But I only want people who want to come and meet me, who are like, oh, this person sings about black cats walking in your dreams and helping protect humans from being ruled by their fears. I want that. So that's who I'm looking for, and not people who I have to like constantly give them a little bit here, a little bit there, just in the right way.
Well, it came easy to me and came easy to Joe, so I'm sure you've got a fan base out there. Hey, Joe, you were trying to jump in and say something. I'm going to give you your moment.
Yeah.
Just at the it was talking about the arguments back and forth about perfection, overproduced, something that comes out prematurely and it gets done better the second time around.
Totally. Yeah.
I was reminded of Duran Duran's The Reflex when it came out from the album Seven and the Ragged Tiger. It sounded the mix was kind of pedestrian, but then there was another mix of The Reflex that came out subsequent to that, and it sounded so good. And just like the women backup singers were brought to the fore, and it was fantastic. It was very joyous and very, very, very hip, very trendy, and just it screamed of nightlife, dance floors, and that kind of exclusive nightclub opulence that Duran Duran does so well. Just the whole thing smacked of Beverly Hills nightlife. So the second time around, it sounded much better.
That whole period, I think, began. The 80s really began this idea of seriously reworking. There was stuff in the 70s that maybe had rework, but certainly as technology got easier to work with, and then you get into the 90s where you had all the remix DJs doing all these really quite varied alternate mixes, that really opened up the possibility for different artistic collaborations. And it wasn't just, me working with my guitarist and drum, but it might be me working with a remixer. And
look up Duran on YouTube, Duran Duran Burning the Ground. It's a 5-minute music video, amalgamation of all Duran Duran songs. It sounds very good. Burning the Ground. It's basically Duran Duran for dummies.
Okay, I'm going to have a nice 80s moment with Duran Duran Burning the Ground. Interesting. I'm a big fan of Planet Earth and the 7-minute version of that. So anyhow, we were talking about clubs as well. And before we started the show, we were talking about Cat Club, which is where my wife and I met. And as far as any sort of nightclub was the closest thing to my second home that's in San Francisco. Joe knows it very well. They have a lot of 80s nights and goth industrial nights. And then when we moved to Seattle, the Mercury, is it Mercury at the Works, I think is the title. The Mercury here in Seattle is the big goth club, if you want to put that goth name as a generic out there. I find the overlap between 80s British music, goth industrial tends to be a lot the same crowd. And I just got my membership card a couple weeks ago. She got hers a week after we first went, and it took a year for mine, which was just written down on the list, or I don't know. For some reason, it took me a year. But we both have our cards, and looking forward to getting out and start dancing again, maybe working off some of the COVID weight. I don't want to be referred to as the hubby butterball anymore.
Oh my goodness. I prefer to reframe the quarantine weight. I call it my quarantits.
Your
And I'm
quarantines.
just enjoying that instead. Because everybody's like, oh, I gained this and I gained that. And I'm like, ladies, this is an opportunity to reassess.
Well, that's one of the
What's
challenges of the male frame versus the female frame. You have more places to put it. Like, okay, I got luscious
That's
thighs.
true.
I'm getting
Yeah, we got pockets.
some cleavage. Where we just get this one Winnie the Pooh bear
It's
structure
true.
that sort of
It's
defies
true.
gravity. I was skinny most of my life. I'm still pretty skinny in my arms, but I can see I'm still filling out. I've been filling out in the face. I was that thin goth guy. And now I'm just like, what is this watermelon butterball thing? And how, and so I'm trying to do the same thing. And I'm also, I had thick curly hair and it's now all thinning. So I've been like, oh man, all my club clothes, I can't wear them anymore. I've got to, and it's not even that. It's also with the band and whatnot. Like I had an image. There was like an image I had as an artist, and now I'm trying to figure out how to recontextualize that. So from the other side of the gender aisle, what are some things I can say? My luscious man boobs, and
You've also got quarantines.
I've got.
You're just not as well received.
There's, it's just not as socially acceptable. But I'm gonna own. I'm gonna own now what I call my Caesar. So I'm saying, okay, look, I got my Caesar haircut. I've got my man boobs of glory, and now I just have to contextualize the butterball.
I mean, I think you should really lean into your mind on this one, because your butterball watermelon description of yourself would win anybody over. So I don't know if you have to worry about that.
That's true. That's true. I solved the problem myself without even knowing it. I
You did.
suddenly made my figure into something that is sweet and juicy and a delicious snack.
There you go. Like, yeah, that means you have more to hug people with. And
Yeah.
I'm
The
moving
hug.
away from the deficit idea.
Yeah, I like that. I like the hug factor. I once was on a business trip in Italy, and I was in Siena, and it was in the evening. And Siena is one of these old Etruscan cities where they built a wall around whatever the highest mountain was, and they built the city inside the wall on the top of the mountain. And so you're there, and you're going into a restaurant, and it's carved right into the rock. So you're in a cave having food and whatnot, and walking around. One thing I noticed was all the powerful men had the shape I have now. They all had nice suits, and they were filled out, and people who were filled out were actually the managers, the directors. Why? Because they went out to the nice restaurants, they had the nice wine, they left fun, and all the thin fashion looked like, ooh, wow, they're really beautiful. You could tell, like, they didn't see themselves that way, and the leaders or the powerful people didn't see them that way. They were, the peasants were thin, and the
Right,
heavier-set people
right.
were, so we do have a certain, these things have a cultural framework.
They do. Barbara Kingsolver is one of my favorite writers, and she wrote a short essay about that, how our idea of what's attractive, in a nutshell, follows wealth. So wealth, years and years and years ago was being able to eat well and to be filled out thick, if you will.
Or even to
But
eat not just
these
well,
days,
but to overeat. You had the
to
luxury to
overeat
overeat.
and the luxury of not working yourself so hard. And now our ideas are about who could, you can afford to be tan to go on vacation. Pale used to be treasured. Now tan is treasured. So the things that we treasure are based on these ideas of wealth, even if we're not really like conscious of it. And it's so nice getting older in some ways. To be able to kind of let go of stuff and embrace, the differences. And I'm really curious this, what the journey is at post, 35. I'm 38 now, and I'm finding that my values are shifting, and also starting to notice how undervalued older people are in our society, and all the wisdom, all the knowledge, all the experiences and the stories and all that stuff that you can't buy. Um, it's so lost and so neglected and invisible. And yeah, it's the cult of youth and beauty and all that is it's not all that. It's nice.
It
But it's not
has,
all that.
and it has. I was thinking about that. Yeah, the peasants no longer work the mines and the farm. The peasants sit in a chair and move their fingers. So weight gain
Hmm.
is now associated with peasant work, whereas before, being really muscular and stout raised and blah blah blah, and was like that was the peasant work. And now it's I have the free time to go to yoga class, 3 days a week in the afternoon. So that's now the luxury. So it's always like I idealizing the luxury. A good point. And then the reflection on your comment about getting older. Yes, getting older is so lovely because you stop caring about things. I might be talking about my shape and whatnot. I'm just as an artist. It's not like I have any
Hmm.
negative view of myself. I just as an artist, I'm contextualizing or aware of how I'm using my image with my art. And what I've been doing more and more is I've just been removing myself. It's no, the album covers don't have me on them anymore. They're usually an
Hmm.
art piece now. Um,
Hmm.
so, but you do definitely go, oh, I can let that go now. Oh, that thing?
Yeah.
Yeah. I worried about that once upon a time. Nah, I don't care.
Yes.
So
Absolutely. I've
that's
been
the,
really enjoying that. Yeah.
it is, I think the best part of growing older is just you
Yeah.
don't care about shit that you used to worry about.
Yeah. And I've heard, who was it? Gloria Steinem wrote about that when women, like menopause, post menopause,
Hmm.
tend to have this second chance at things because it's the first time in a woman's life where you're not treated like an object, like, oh, you're so pretty, and rewarded for being just this and just that. And so there comes this freedom for women who aren't holding those things so precious. So yeah,
And it's left over from the arranged marriage tradition, right? You're so pretty. We can package you. We can marry you to the prince and then elevate our farm shares. And so as a woman, you're a strategic value. And now you're in menopause. It's a different relationship. That's no longer the
values.
game.
Yeah. Yep. The cultural value is gone. It's I think I told you I used to work at Portland Radio Project, and I interviewed this beautiful woman in her 50s, gorgeous. And we were talking with the microphones off, and I was like asking her about her routine, her beauty routine, and all that kind of stuff. And she said, "Stephanie, I'm hot." And I looked at her, I was like, "You are hot. You're super hot." And she was like, "Men don't even look at me anymore. I I was a dancer my whole life, and like as soon as like I started going through menopause, they don't even look at me." And it was such an interesting moment because at that point I was 34, 35. And she kind of like was preparing me for this thing that happens of your value in the traditional way is gone. So you have to figure out what else there is.
I
One of
would,
my
s-
famous memes on that I've saw of late was there's a meme, a pictorial of four basically paintings, sort of like of the Golden Girls if they were made up by Patrick Nagel. And it was very stylish and very beautiful.
I've seen that. Yes.
You're
So good.
you're on an 80s tear tonight, Joe. Patrick Nagel. I'll have to check that out.
Good.
Yeah, I think that I bet, I'm just throwing this out there, I bet because she was looked at a certain way as a professional dancer for so long, she was looking for those signals to come from a certain channel.
Hmm.
Because if she's hot, I guarantee men are still looking at her, attracted to her, etc. But she's so used to coming from a certain wavelength and a certain maybe age group and whatnot, that if she moved to Marin, California and went out anywhere, she'd be, top of the attention. So it also depends sort of what community you're around. And if you're around dancers, you're always thinking in that context of the young dancer. I moved from Emeryville to Marin. And in Emeryville, I think the average age was like 25. And when I moved to Marin, the average age was 65.
Oh yeah.
And suddenly
Definitely.
I went from being the middle-aged guy at karaoke into being the young guy. And like every bar I went to and people walk in, it's like, ooh, who's the young guy? So she just needs to hang out in a different scene. That's what I'm saying.
Right, for sure. And there's a problem with our rewards, for sure, towards youth and beauty. It happens in such a sneaky way. I remember in high school, I had lost a ton of weight. I was taking diet pills, and I dropped down to like 108 pounds or something absolutely
Whoa.
crazy. Looking back at pictures, I looked like a boy. I didn't have any extra fat or anything. And I remember my female friends, their mothers, just told me how beautiful I was. Whatever you're doing, keep it up. You look so good.
Wow.
And looking back, I realized how bad that was, how dangerous that was. And I got it from such a specific sector of women who were indoctrinating me into this idea. Keep doing it. To be told, whatever you're doing, keep doing it. When I knew I was hurting myself.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty messed up. It's messed up, and we do it without even thinking.
I'm aware of that Barbie culture thing, but I don't tend to see moms as being the projector of that. Wow, talk about being indoctrinated to the point that you're now indoctrinating the next generation.
Yeah, absolutely. Or, I mean, it comes in the same way of, oh, you'll want to have kids, or, oh, this, or in all these different ways where we keep each other in line and penned in, doing what we're supposed to be doing until we don't know what's our own and what is somebody else's. Because so many of the values that I've carried in my life, they're not mine. And I'm starting to realize that. And that's great. So that allows me to have the opportunity to let go of the things that someone else has been forcing me to take. Like, I don't want that present. No.
You don't want to
go
be a
into
porter
it.
for other people's baggage.
Yeah. And we all want to do it to each other. I do not blame those mothers. They also got it from somewhere. But I think it's good to be mindful of how we're giving people positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement.
I can only imagine the conversations we could have with that dancer, that overaged dancer, the thing coming out of her head over several hours of coffee and pastries, just talking into the night. That's what I miss. That's what most people should miss.
Yeah.
Well, it will be
Get to
back,
it, yeah.
and we're doing it on Zoom, and we're going to start doing it back out. For me, that was at karaoke. I got addicted to karaoke for like 10 years. And it was great because every day, 7 days a week, head after work, go to karaoke bars, sit down, and I would talk to everybody of every age group, every walk of life, every ethnic American tradition, and everybody was there at this one place. And I do miss that. I miss that, like being connected with a very diverse humanity. Because you would have these conversations and you would have breakthroughs,
Right.
better than therapy. It's like, hey, I'm going to go do a song. Sing. Oh, it's my turn. I'm going to do a song about this. And so, yeah, this coffee shop conversations are really important. And if you're open to having them, you can have your life reframed in new ways. And whatever you think you are, and wherever you are, and if you're willing to step into that space, you will find gifts.
Every Sunday night.
I love that.
Oh, thank you,
love it.
Joe. Thank you. I'm not a natural. I'm a total introvert, and I never in a million years would have chosen to do this show. And Joe knows that. So he reminds me of the value of this show and of what is happening here that is sort of out of my control. And, you know, like the engine's rolling and I've been picked to be the guy who's blowing the whistle at the wheel, and the universe has said go, and I've accepted and I'm going. But I'm quite often talking to him offline, like, what am I doing this for? What's this? This is so not me. You know, I just like to be sitting puttering in my studio and working on the next track instead. That's, 2 hours a week I would have back to putter. And he's like, there's a bigger thing going on here. You just need to stick with it. So thank you, Joe.
Right.
I want to show,
your jokers.
speaking of this image and the eye, I won't even call it the male gaze. I went through that in the 90s with my mentor and professor. You would have loved Barbara DeGenevieve. I'm going to just call it the human gaze. And I think this song really seems to be about that. So here is Leave Me Alone or Take Me to Bed.
Sometimes it feels like I'm on a mission to go mano a mano with my own doom. And I am determined to go out with a boom. With trips like these, oh, the places I could see, oh, the places I could go. In a handbasket masquerading as a limousine. Don't be mean. Treat me gently as you would a child. Won't you hold me gently as you would a child? If I paint my nails red and I turn on the blues, you'll know I'm in a mood. But you can still win. You have to choose to leave me alone or take me to bed. Leave me alone or take me to bed. don't sound like fun. I've heard cats dance, but all dogs go to heaven. Still, who does everybody want to be? Everybody wants to be, which tells us that cats can dance. They just value their privacy. Everybody, yet they just value their privacy. But if I take off my shoes and I sing the blues, you'll know I'm in the mood. You can still win. You have to choose to leave me alone or take me to bed. Leave me alone or take me to bed. They say everybody wants to be a cat. 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 But you can't get a good dog down. Leave me alone or take me to bed. Thank you.
That was Leave Me Alone or Take Me to Bed by Strange and the Familiars. We are here with Stephanie Strange. I want to clarify my statement there about the male gaze, just so I don't go down in history here. Yes, there's a male gaze thing. So Barbara, she started as like the married housewife in, Kansas kind of situation, then went through the Gloria Steinem 70s, all things identified as male are negative. I'm not pinning Gloria just with that. Obviously, Gloria's statements are far more complex, oversimplifying for the show. Then by the early 90s had gotten into the art movement about the abject. In the early 90s, it stopped being about beautiful things, about disturbing things. It became about the beautiful, disturbing things. So you see this in art and movies where beauty and disturbance were always juxtaposed. And Barbara took this wisdom and in my master's, she was part of my master's thesis, always challenged all control structures that anybody was facing. You did a piece of art and she would sniff what control structure was behind that and then challenge you to go and break it. So for all of us guys, it was, you don't know what you're talking about until you get dressed in drag and walk around downtown San Francisco for a little while, which I did. And other peers did as well. And we all got to feel the cat calls and the constant radar scanning that's going on, and now poof, you're the target of that scanning and what that feels like. And in my case, I was going from a spot where I knew people to another spot where I knew people, but specifically during the length of time alone. And you feel that vulnerability, and you feel inside yourself these two gender forms present. You're feeling the vulnerability of how you're being perceived as a female, and then inside your head you're saying, yeah, but I'm still a male, I can still punch, or something. It starts playing all these things in your mind. That's the whole point of the exercise. And so, yes, during that experience, there was a very different gaze for men and women. Was there a gaze? Yes. Have I felt that kind of gaze from women? Yes. So that's why I say it's a human gauge. It might be more common in one gender than another gender. It still happens as a human thing where in the bottom line, when you strip it all away, it's all about respect. You should respect other people and see them as fellow human beings, no matter their gender, no matter economic situation, etc. So she was really good at seeing all that and really breaking that down. So to me, every day, I'm always thinking about how am I controlled by how I've been told the world is? And how can and when you let go of one of those controls, it's amazingly liberating. Whether it's gender, whether it's politics, whether it's religion, etc. All of a sudden you're like, oh, I was told I needed all these things. And aging is a great tool for that. Because all of a sudden you go, oh, I don't need that. Oh, I don't need that.
Yeah,
I don't need to be presenting myself as an optimal, reproduce with human. Oh, okay, that pressure's off. And you drop these things. And it happens for males and females and trans people, where if you drop things, you're like, oh, okay. And there's a liberation that comes with that. So that's my clarification for the record.
Nice. Important to clarify. Sounds like a very impressive woman that you studied with.
Yes. And she...
I mean, any woman who can get a group of guys to go out and drag and walk around, kudos.
And you... and she adopted... it wasn't like it was purely philosophical. She adopted these practices. At a certain point, now that she's passed on, I think I could talk more freely about things we talked about in private. But she realized one day she could be predatory. She reached a certain point, like, I can be predatory. This male gaze, I can adopt. I'm a human being. I can do it too. And not artificially, but I can allow myself to do it because I actually like staring and objectifying. And so for her, this was a flip. It was like feminism first, second wave feminism for her was about a rejection of that, be a housewife, get married, and everything that was put on her from childhood, being able to break free of that. And then she realized the place she'd broken free of had its own control structures. And there's like you break free of your victimhood to find you're hanging out with all the victims. And that a part of the liberation is there, but along with the liberation part, you have this other shadow, which is that all of your liberation is in the context of the thing you liberated yourself from. So therefore it's still present, just in a different form. And then if you go, oh, wait a minute, I'm now free of oppression, but now I've become so passive, and guess what? I feel like controlling someone right now. Okay, is that okay that I now become the oppressor that I broke free of? And how do I become that and yet not go back and perpetuate? So she really evolved through this, finding in herself how I could be dominant without oppressive, and was exploring that later in life.
I like that she tried to help you all experience at least being unstable. I don't think that, I'm not saying that you're saying this, but I don't think that going around in drag, I think it must be a very destabilizing experience in some ways and help the wheels turn. But the freedom to flex and bend, I think, is afforded to women a little bit more in our culture. We have a little bit more room to flex our masculine side. And I play with that a lot on stage. I do enjoy objectifying, and I enjoy flipping. I think it's very funny to turn the tables and to be a woman on stage who is objectifying males verbally, with all in good fun. With, you know, I'm smiling. We're all having fun. I back off if somebody seems like they're not having fun. But I've always found that to be a very interesting tool, and I do it because I like it and because it's enjoyable, but also it demonstrates something that you rarely see, which is, you know, I'll present myself in a certain way and then bring it out, and this sort of masculinity, definitely, and whatever goes with that male gaze comes out, where it's, you know, how does it feel to be sized up, to be looked up and down, to be not the one who's guiding the conversation? I think that's really powerful, and I think it's really fun, and I wish that men had more freedom in our society to play with their feminine side, and to also experience what it's like to be constantly sized up. I think it would be much better. And in that way, I think that sexism affects both men and women. And it's just so much more internal with men, because you don't get to have those experiences and flex in that same way that women, you know, I can dress in drag, I can be masculine, I have more elbow room in our society for that.
It certainly has developed this way, where women have gotten more liberated in the range, and that wasn't always so. And men in some ways became more distilled down into the 50s and 60s. I remember reading a book about gender that talked about, in colonial times, like, old Colonel, you know, was out chopping his wood in his dress again today. He's a great citizen. And there were like articles, like local newspapers that were talking about people, and you realize there are people doing all sorts of stuff that in a context of the 50s American ideal of a male would not be tolerated. So the argument they were making in this book was that at various points in history, there's been male flexibility, and then at other times not. And I feel like in my lifetime, I've gone through that gamut, and I've seen, in some ways right now, millennial males seem to have greater flexibility because the trans movement, because gay marriage. So within that conversation, even though it has nothing to do with being gay or trans specifically, there is just a wider conversation about gender and sexuality happening in American society. And within that space, I'm seeing not so much the costumes and the adoption of other gender. It's not drag, but it's more like I can be a sensitive male and I'm not being a sensitive male. Like in my generation, certainly going through the 70s, like, oh, be a sensitive male, be more understanding, let down your armor and guard. You don't have to be a man, or, you know, and this robot. You can be a human being. You can cry. You can It's definitely has a different flavor now. It's like everybody's being a dude. Whether you're male or female, you can all be guys. You can all be dudes. In that, and somewhere in there is an interplay that is happening. Like the opening band last night, the lead bassist was wearing a dress, and I didn't think anything of it. And I see a lot more of that in his generation, where it's like it's not other. So in some ways, I feel like the range is shrunk, and in some ways the range is opened, and it's just a little different. With my generation, it was definitely around that, the psychological sensitivity. That was the kind of focus. You're a guy. You can be weak. You can cry. You can be sensitive. And then probably after that was more like guys playing with gender. Certainly the 80s, 90s, guys playing with gender aspects, adoption, cross adoption. I'll send you some links to some stuff that I was involved with. And there was a movement in the 90s that has a certain name that led to a certain song and certain album. It still gets played a lot. That really was about that. How do you appropriate something without integrating it? So not drag, not I am now dressed as a female, but as I'm going to adopt different components in a dissonant way so that it becomes its own thing. And I feel like that was very jarring at that time, but now it's kind of like calmed down and distilled into just a more common, like, I don't care. Right? It's less shocking now. It's like, yeah, whatever. Frank's doing his Frank thing. He wears nail polish. Big deal.
I mean, especially in Portland, lines are blurrier and there's progress and not progress disguised as progress. There's definitely been men I've interacted with who are going to be the first on the captain of the feminist ship, but nothing in their behavior reflects that they are truly feminists. They're just appropriating terms and taking that flexibility without extending any kind of deeper understanding towards other people. I just think it's complicated, but I think we're moving in the right direction in general, really slowly, much too slowly for many people's tastes. But it's a big complicated thing. People are different, but I think that I like what I'm seeing for the most part. And then people become more savvy too. A guy can't just come around and call himself a feminist and get a club card. Yeah, these days. And then the lines of gender even more. I'm so grateful to the trans movement because it really sheds a light on gender in general and our emphasis on this and our reliance on these strict terms and ideas. So good, keep it going, shake it up.
Yeah. I think the culture is really, I think it's matured, and I think it was President Obama that said, when you look back on history, it's a zigzag. There's no line to history. It's a zigzag. And it will always be. And it's always been where that zigzag happens, sometimes more in the city environment and sometimes more in the country environment. And I think right now we're just in a place where more city is actually more flexible than country. But
Not a doubt.
And it was interesting reading some of these writings that described it differently. Like going to New York, people had to conform, but out in Vermont, however you want to dress, and that was surprising. And it's fascinating times, and of course, there's like anything when there's transitions, there are backlashes to transitions, and
yeah.
But I do overall see, when I'd go to the karaoke bar, you're seeing all the generations present. And I would say the younger generations, there was stuff that they just didn't care about. For example, each generation sings songs of their generation. And then you would hit a certain age and that stopped happening. Like everybody below, say, 28 was performing any song from within history. Whereas everybody 35 and older was singing songs of their generation. And I saw, that's a good sign. They don't care about when this song was written, when it was popular. They only care that they like it. They heard it and they like it because they're swimming in a sea of music all the time. YouTube, iTunes, it's all just this big catalog. And for them, it didn't matter if it came out last week or 40 years ago. They discovered it. And it's their song and they're going to perform it. It makes sense?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And I think gender has kind of flowed into that, where they don't care about these delineations that previous generations of Americans cared about.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting. We're at such a time of change in so many ways, and things have been changing, but so much in the last. We're actually seeing it happen now, like the results of all this change that's been brewing under the surface, and in good ways and bad. And
when you see people feeling threatened, there's a reason they're feeling threatened. And
Right.
that's a
Agreed.
sign that actually good things are happening, because there's good things happening that are threatening their hegemony.
Exactly. It's uncomfortable.
That's the problem with a lot of cisgender, a lot of cis males feel threatened because they think to them equality feels like oppression.
Right. Because in a relative basis, it is. If you're allowed to do anything you want and talk to people any way you want, and this is everything that you're used to and you're handed at birth, then it hurts when things are taken away. Oh, I was just kidding. Oh, I didn't mean anything by that. I've always done that. And yeah, as a feminist, I've always been interested in the male side of things, and I've also like I love hanging with the dudes, and I know how to handle it. Like if somebody gives me a compliment that might be off color or might be considered sexist in the wrong environment, I'm working because I'm a special ed teacher and a musician. That means I work a pizza job, and I had somebody recently. There were two gentlemen, and they were maybe 15 years older than me, and one of them, he was paying me a compliment. He was saying something, and he was like, "Well, you really got it going on." And I was like, "Thank you." He was like, "Yeah, the whole thing." And he kind of like pushed it a little bit too far. And I had this moment of, I could tell this guy that's inappropriate. I could give him a dirty look. I could put him down. I could do all these things, and instead I just was like, I know. And I walked away from him, and I was like, okay, I can take these things and just let them go. I don't have to react and respond to everything because he didn't mean it in a bad way. It would have been taken in a bad way, and I could have definitely just turned it all around and made him feel like
Yeah,
like an old fogey.
we're all still learning. We're all still learning.
Yeah.
And Rome wasn't built in a day. Nirvana comes rather slowly. On the other hand, again, I would say as a guy, privilege, it's like water to a fish. You stop seeing it after a while. You don't even know that it's there. So when it's called addressed to, that can be quite the disruption of the pillars of privilege.
Yeah.
They shake and crumble, and men have to
Very
find
nice.
a new balance.
Absolutely, and that's very discombobulating. There's anger that comes with that. I tend to, although I'm very reactionary sometimes, I tend to give people a little more grace than it might be politically correct sometimes, because I know that people are trying and learning, and that can be like a very ugly, complicated process. But if you just rail on people and don't give them a chance to find things out and don't give them a little bit of humor, then that usually doesn't end up well. It's best to gently, what works for me is when someone makes fun of me. That's the thing that turns that light bulb on of, oh, I've been operating in this way that I wouldn't anymore. And that's usually somebody gently, lovingly laughing at me.
Oh,
Not
that-
somebody who's just like, you're wrong. This is terrible. You're the worst.
The Irish have a saying, make fun of yourself first before someone else beats you to it.
It's beautiful. I love that. Yes.
It's very Zen-like if you think about it.
Mhm.
The killing of self, meaning the killing of ego. It becomes
Exactly.
a legitimate superpower.
Yeah. Nobody can hurt you if you're willing to make fun of yourself first and everybody else second. Yeah.
And using humor to manage conflict is a great, great skill. And what you did there is like conflict management 101. Like you said, if you just attack back, you become the attacker. Okay, I'm now being the victim. The attacker's coming at me. Now I'm going to take the attack and attack them. That never leads to an even playing field. They either back down, right? They become the attacked, or they then try to flip it back and become the attacker at the next level. And now you got an escalation going on. And the real art to any change management and conflict management is learning how to remove the conflict, but leave the point.
Yeah. Yeah. And which comes to being reactionary, right? Not taking things personally and not,
Yeah. Like they're doing this
Putting up a
thing
wall.
and you called them out on it And in a way that when you walked away, they had the opportunity at that moment to go, oh, all right, I get it. Or not.
Right.
But you gave them that gift. And that's a real talent to have. And I would say that that is the number one skill we're needing in the United States right now.
Yeah, I think just a little bit of lightness would go a very long way for everything not to be so loaded and for not to be, this is a personal affront to me. And you represent every sexist asshole I've ever encountered in my whole life, especially in customer service. You are again putting me in this box I've put in a million times. You're talking down to me. I could have gone all those places so easily, but it just doesn't help. It's not helpful. And if you are able and lucky enough to have the perspective and the room and the comfort in your life to be able to not react, I think that's always a good thing to go to. But also, trying to be gentle with ourselves and other people when they are reactionary too is even harder to do.
Yes.
Because sometimes that moment passes and if you react, and being like very forgiving of people when that happens, trying to, without it being toxic or bullying.
The new soft skill.
Yes, those soft skills.
It's funny. I've heard that phrase soft skills and thought about it so much for so long. I hadn't thought about this. Soft skills are not about being soft. Right? There's a passivity that leads to victimhood. And soft skills, oddly enough, don't. Right? They're an empowerment, but it lies in a more subtle engagement. It's almost like soft skills is the ability. Developing soft skills is the ability to develop an inherent self-confidence in everybody who's practicing it.
For sure. I think the ability to practice soft skills a lot of times comes from a deeper confidence and a deeper trust.
Almost a negotiation of sorts.
Oh yeah, isn't it all?
Yes.
With yourself and others and what
I think
happened
The
yesterday.
mastery of which makes you sound very, not passive aggressive, because that's not what it's about. But you sound very adult-like, almost a very authoritarian without being aggressive. You represent the order of things as opposed to the reaction of things. Like, you can't do this because I'm going to kick your so-and-so. Rather, you can't do this because this is not how it's done, and this is not how people work in the world. And you almost sound like, not a cop, but of an authoritarian figure. Then people go, oh, okay, I suppose. And so you get them to see the light without reacting. You don't get them to react. You get them to see the light.
Yeah. I mean, this may or may not be related, but I was visiting with some friends of mine the other day. Complementary Colors is a band based here out of Portland. And Ashley and Camille, they're two of my favorite people. And I realized that just by being their friend for a couple of years, they show this unconditional love and support and lack of judgment. It's really, really radical love. And it doesn't seem like this big thing. Maybe sometimes it seems like a little much when people are just so kind and so not non-judgmental and like, oh my gosh, how do you get there? But just by being with them and being exposed to that for a couple of years now, I find myself kinder, more generous, and more open. I feel elevated. And they've never told me I should be different. Ever. They told me I'm perfect just the way I am, and they give me all this love. And but by being exposed to that over and over and over again, kind of, it raises you a little bit. So I think the more that we are able to practice that when we can, has these huge long-term effects. Nothing that we see right away or that we know. It's all in hindsight, but it makes such a big impact.
Amen to that. There was some recent studies about that people who, it was an unpopular study because it showed like people who are like,
it's all in hindsight.
Someone's listening to the show. it was saying basically that rich people who become mentors of poor people actually don't end up benefiting the person because there's such a standard that they've set, and the person's reflecting on that person actually is harder on themselves. There's a long-term study, which, while I find interesting, some people interpret that to mean we shouldn't help others, that helping others is in fact a bad thing. And as a person who is teaching kids who have disabilities, I just personally want to thank you as a person with disabilities. And I function in the world now in a way that I'm not a disabled person. And that was because people like you invested time in people like me. That's, maybe I'm overstating that statement about me and you, but I met people along my life that gave me a tool, and I was able to go left, not right, because they were there and they gave me a tool. And I was driven enough to use that tool. So my life flourished because of that. So as just personally on air, I want to thank you for your hard work doing that, because that experience let me know that that's not easy on anybody. And it's really tough work. But as I look back on my life, it meant everything. We seem to have lost your audio. Oh, you're on mute.
It's because I'm muted. Thank you. I appreciate that. And I do want to clarify, though, I teach adults with IDD, intellectual and developmental disabilities. But it's the same thing. It's still, being there. And I learn as much, if not more, from my experiences. I get taught all the time. I never finished college. This was an amazing opportunity that came up after putting in some hard work, and it's definitely, I can say for sure that I'm humbled, and I've learned more than I thought I would. It's not as much about teaching; it's more about just being there and hanging as a peer in a lot of ways. And the mirrors and the reflections that we all give each other, the challenges we present to each other, and I think we're all helping each other out. I don't know if it's a one-way street ever.
That's the bottom line. Have a little grace, step back, take a deep breath, have a little humor, and help out others. It's, it's really not that tough of a gig, and it makes a world of a difference. I was 6 years into my bachelor's degree, and the American with Disabilities Act went through, and everybody that voted for that act in Congress and supported that bill, you changed my life. And so I was walking around campus, and there was a Disabilities Awareness Week that was a part of that. And they had people blindfolded to walk around campus, so you see what it's like to be blind, people stuffed in their ears, seeing what it's like to be deaf. And I was going around these different stations, and I went to this one station, and the gal handed me a sheet of paper, blank sheet of paper, and a sheet of paper with some writing on it, and said, your task is to write on the blank sheet of paper, what you read over here. So I read the document, and I started writing things out. And she stopped me and said, what are you doing? I'm like, doing the task. You said to write this. She goes, the piece of paper I gave you is not readable. So what are you writing down? There's something going on here. And I had become so good at I'd become so comfortable with basically completing the missing pieces. I was able to read this heavily Xeroxed, poorly Xeroxed things. So that put me in the system, and all of a sudden I had computer programs available to me. So this was as an adult. I had computer programs available that I could do before I took tests. I had a very good diagnostic, so I could see exactly where there was a dissonance in me between intelligence and ability. So everything was mapped out, and suddenly I can go, oh, that's the spot. That's the spot. Okay, what tools do I need to bridge these gaps and make me function more? Because certainly if you talk to people before this, certain people would be like, I never understand what the hell he's talking about. And I could see how years later, oh, okay, right. And I'm able to now be very precise and very articulate. So my point is, people have a certain amount of plasticity. There is a limit to it for a given individual, and I don't know how severe the individuals you're working with are, and how much plasticity they might have. But I would hope, from my personal experience, I would hope that those people too have some flexibility to adopt the tools that you're helping them with.
Oh, there's more plasticity than would ever be imagined. FAME is the name of the school, PHAME. And it's one of the only programs, the arts programs for adults with IDD. It's beautiful. The students who are able to pay for their classes create the scholarship program for people who can't afford it. People have been known to come in not verbal or barely verbal and come out verbal.
That's huge.
And it's huge. And then we went online seamlessly. The team that works behind the scenes, the administrative team, got us up running online. And then we had these orientations for the students on Zoom. And we all figured out Zoom together, and the ability to embrace this and do it, and to get online every day and deal with the Zoom fatigue and deal with discomfort, and also embrace certain things. Like, there's been some more growth in some ways because people are at home in their comfortable environment and they're able to participate in ways that they never could in person. Sensory issues are reduced in a lot of ways when people are working from home, and increased in others when someone's microphone is on the fritz and it's super loud, or you have to look at yourself and you're so hyper aware of what you look like. And it's interesting because the students, they know themselves so well, and they're able to, their lives is managing this and being on top of that. And it brings so much awareness as a teaching artist, is what we're called, to being really in touch with your own stuff and be like, okay, I'm getting Zoom fatigue. I'm not there yet, but I'm recognizing that's where it's at. And, we all communicate that way. I would bet cash money that all of the people who work there would feel like they've benefited from that and know themselves better from having worked with the population, specifically in the realm of arts.
And does music therapy come into this work, or this particular organization?
Not trained music therapy, but it's all therapy in the way that art is therapy. I teach a memoir writing class where students are writing their stories, which is so therapeutic. And so no, not in the like a professional way, but in the way that when you create and you learn how to express yourself, that is.
Okay, that's how I meant it. I didn't mean it in any sort of like academically defined music therapy, but just the use of music or the arts. Mm-hmm. So you said in this case you're using memoirs, so people are getting to tell their story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and having the room and space to be able to express their story and that being valued. And but then there's all kinds of stuff. There's drumming classes, there's rhythms and rhymes, there's puppets, there's animation, there's video production. There's some really wonderful things happening there. And also getting online and everybody being so adaptable, and that plasticity being there has allowed us to expand our program to nationally, because now we have online classes. So people on the East Coast and the Midwest and the South can join us and be a part of our community, which is so great. And it's looking like it's a model that's going to continue to expand. And I hope so, because I'm no expert, but the history of IDD in this country is super spotty. When they shut down the hospitals because the hospitals were not treating people well and abusing them, there really wasn't a very good option otherwise. So before I started getting into at FAME with teaching, I was involved in going into people's homes and helping them. And everybody I talked to was like, I'm so sorry that you're in that job because people don't last in that job and it breaks them. This over and over again. And I was like, not me. I'm going to make it because I really care and I'm, this, that. And I think I lasted about 5 months before I was silently screaming into the carpet with spittle hanging out of my mouth and just had undersleep, overworked, and really being in an environment of poverty, intense poverty. And people not being taken care of their entire lives and what that does to people when they're neglected and hurt and left behind over and over again. So it was such a blessing to find fame because I didn't last. And this world and this country need places where people can go to outside of those structures that aren't really serving people very well, especially people who are in poverty with IDD.
Yeah, certainly we're struggling to struggling to provide a robust society for the folks who are fully functional. And if you're doing that, folks that are on any margin of seen as less value than that are a really, really challenging spot. So
yeah, we expand these definitions. Okay, women have more rights than they've ever had before, and then it just we marginalize somebody new. There's always somebody new coming out. But I think that's a sign of growth that
it's a sign of growth, and it also shows
there's
the range that humanity has been always working with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
So, and we introduce new problems through, substance exposure. The famous case of lead gasoline, where the guy who was trying to age the Earth goes down to Antarctica, is collecting core samples, and he finds they're all topped with lead, and he's like, where's this lead coming from? Is it meteorites? Where's this stuff coming? No, we are coating the entire planet from pole to pole with a layer of lead, which has no untoxic level. Any level of lead causes neurological and joint damage. And in the United States, we still have places where we have lead pipes and we're putting water through it and people are drinking lead. And yet we've known since the Roman era that this is toxic. So we've got a lot of work to do. And at the same time, guess what? Lead gasoline, for the most part, has been banned globally. And the Romans knew that lead was toxic, but they continued to use it in their baths because it was too economically and materially advantageous to use lead. It's very malleable. You can do lots of things with it. They knew it was a bad idea. The Victorians knew the hatters were all going mad from mercury poisoning, right? But hey, there was no other option for making cool hats. So we're going to go ahead and accept this. And I see that more and more people aren't accepting. Folks would like it to be like everybody accepts. Well, it's never been everybody accepts, but we've gone from maybe 1% accepting to like 60% accepting. That's an improvement.
Yeah. I think there's progress.
Well, folks, thank you for tuning in. We had an extra long session having a great chat here with Stephanie Strange, but it is time to wrap up and go get food. I'm going to give Joe his last call. Stephanie, hang on line just briefly longer, and we'll have a very brief post-show wrap-up. And this is now the last call with Joe Price. You out there, Joe?
I am. This is pertaining to what we spoke about earlier in the episode. Perfection. Perfection is overrated. Perfection can be procrastination with an alibi. Imperfection is perfection, that human touch devoid of the sanitary, the sterile, the safe. Drop your guard and put forth your creativity, your ideas, that others can bear witness to what you see, that you are not simply imagining the raw beauty and feeling of life. You will draw your tribe around you, and they you toward them.
Thank you, Joe. Everybody out there, stay safe. Take care of yourself. Be kind to others as you want them to be kind to yourself. And we'll see you next week. If you'd like to find out more about me and my work, you can look me up at Caleb Duarte on Facebook. And thank you for watching.